Good morning, everybody. Welcome along to the Snetterton 300 circuit, a warm and sunny Snetterton 300 circuit for the morning warm-up session here for the Intelligent Money British GT Championship. We're at the midway point of the 2022 campaign, and two 60-minute sprint races are coming your way a little bit later on today. The first race begins at 10:45 this morning. We then do it all again just after 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And if the qualifying sessions that we enjoyed yesterday afternoon are anything to go by, we're in for quite the day of racing. The Snetterton 300 circuit always does produce good racing action, plenty of opportunities to overtake, and in qualifying yesterday the times were very, very close. A couple of balance of performance changes overnight as well, which we'll get into in a little while, which will further compress the field. I think we're in for an entertaining day of racing. Andy McEwen here in the commentary box, joined once again this weekend by Joe Osborne. And Joe, yesterday's qualifying sessions were very interesting, weren't they? A Mercedes domination in GT3, and then the exact opposite in GT4, completely wide open. Very, very difficult to predict what's going to happen today, especially with these amendments to the BOP. Yeah,
100%. We rarely see a dominant manufacturing qualifying. It's normally really well split. The balance of performance is a hugely complicated formula, but one that is being honed in on brilliantly by SRO over the last decade, really. So to see a Mercedes that we're seeing on shot here, first, second and third in the AM session, and first, second, third and fourth in the pro session, obviously something was a little bit amiss with that formula. So SRO have amended it overnight. The Mercedes has been hit in two ways: 15 kilos extra weight, and also 0.1 of a taken out of their lambda. So that basically means they're getting less fuel, especially at low end. The torque of that car will be hurt. Talking to the teams, they reckon that's anywhere from 4 to 5 tenths as a time loss. And then the McLaren really was the one on the back foot pace-wise, and that's been given some help. That's had 10 kilos taken out and more boost, and that's kind of in the region of 2 to 3 tenths gain. So suddenly we've got this accordion effect of potentially 8 tenths of a second over the lap. And unfortunately for those guys, the slow guys are now at the front and the fast guys are at the back. But for us, that's going to make an interesting formula for the 2 hours of racing today.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, Snetterton always a close pair of races here, especially when we have dry conditions. It's been weather affected somewhat the last couple of years, but the forecast today is for the weather conditions to remain favourable through the rest of the day. Now, third member of our team this weekend will be a familiar face to you, Bryn Lucas down in the pit lane, and he is with who will start on pole position, Bryn, for the second race this afternoon.
We've been talking a little bit about the BOP changes to the car overnight. It means you're going to be impacted somewhat at the start, but you've got 4 cars around you, or 3 cars around you that are identical on the start of the grid, Ulyss.
Yeah, we've had a bit of weight added and a bit power reduced, but doesn't matter. Qualifying is done. We showed that we had a great pace. I've got 3 Mercedes behind me, so I'm not scared. I will do my race, and we still have the pace. That BOP won't change the rhythm.
You're not at all concerned at all. So it sounds like you're fairly relaxed ahead of race 1 then.
Yeah, John had a difficult qualifying, but he's gaining experience, he's improving every time he gets in the car, so we will try to improve again for race 1 and be as much ready as possible for the second race where it counts for us.
Great stuff. We've got to get out of the way because the car's been dropped down, but good luck. Thank you.
There you go then, confident Ulyss de Pauw, who claimed his first pole position in British GT yesterday afternoon and will be on pole position for race number 2. We are continuing to smash lap records, by the way. The fastest time set by Ulyss de Pauw yesterday was 1:45.8. That was compared to a 1:48.5, which was the existing qualifying lap record for Phil Keane. This is all due to this new Pirelli tyre, which in qualifying especially, Joe, is yielding so much grip in those early laps, and that's why we're seeing ridiculously quick lap times. I mean, we expected to beat the lap record yesterday, but not by that much.
No, definitely not. And as we focus in on that tyres to a driver and even to the uneducated like yourself, Andy, just look black and round. But Pirelli do so much development work in the background, and I probably drove this tyre 18 months ago now in its first stages, and I remember when we first bolted it on, and we're like, wow, this is special, this is fast. And interestingly, it was actually a change pushed by EU regulation to get rid of some of the more toxic materials in the tyres. So it's actually more eco-friendly and faster. So it's a double win here. But yeah, as a driver now in the 45s round, Snetterton is seriously fast. And we're going to see that today with the racing. The cars are just that much more on edge because they're not really developed to go that quick. The energy the tyres putting through the car has to go somewhere, and you're really seeing it in the car in the fast loaded corners.
It's a good point, actually. I hadn't thought about that. We are going that much quicker now. A tenth or two, you wouldn't notice, but going several seconds faster than usual is going to be quite the shock, I would imagine, for the drivers. It's the same story in GT4. They also smashed their lap record, a lap record which was set by Scott Mulvin in qualifying in 2019. The GT3 record had stood since 2017. So, yeah, we've been waiting a while to break those lap records, and we're very much likely to do the same in the race later on. So 15 minutes of morning warm-up now getting underway, then cars making their way out onto the circuit, and this morning warm-up session, which is always a little bit of a risky session for me. We've seen in the past that teams have run into difficulties in these warm-up sessions, either accident damage, mechanical failures, but it does have its benefits, doesn't it? Especially with these BOP changes, Joe. I think this warm-up session is perhaps a bit more significant than most, because the teams, of course, have had no running. Those that have had an amended BOP, they've had no running with that new BOP on board. So actually, an extra 15 minutes of track time is quite useful. Yeah,
definitely. When you think the popular brands of Mercedes and McLaren are the two affected, more than half the field have a different car to what they got out of yesterday in qualifying. So they definitely want to feel the braking points will change, added weight, added power, or the other way round. Then it is interesting to see what we're doing. The warm-up's important as well. There are a lot of teams will be bedding brakes, so you can't just take a set of brakes off the shelf, put them on and expect them to perform straight away. They have to go through a whole warm-up procedure. So it's probably what we're seeing here with you and Hankey on board. The 76 McLaren going quite slowly. Just build those temperatures up gradually and go from there. But yeah, the warm-up session always feels a bit risky as a driver. There's nothing to gain, but a huge amount to lose. You saw the Enduro car diving into the pit lane. That's the other thing you can do, is practice your pit stops. Get that minimum time absolutely nailed on, so when it comes to the race, you're ready to go. So looks like Ewan has picked up the pace a little bit. So if he's bedding brakes, he's not doing it too cautiously. You can see the amount of dust already getting drawn onto the circuit. I think that's going to be quite a big factor actually out of the turn one there, as Sandy Mitchell kicks up even more. So it's going to be an interesting race with many dynamics.
John Ferguson here in the Ram Racing Mercedes, which, as we said, has that pole position for race 2, but will start deep in the field, 13th on the grid for race 1. He was one of a number of drivers actually in that AM session for GT3 who had lap times disallowed for exceeding track limits, but the Mercedes AMG looked reasonably quick yesterday, and the news breaking during the week, or the last week or so anyway, that Unisita Power will be joining now John Ferguson in that Ram Racing car for the rest of the season, replacing Jamie Caroline. So these two now get a chance to work together. Now he's messing around with something there. Was that a wire maybe?
I think it's the intercom system for the radio. So he's obviously boxing this lap. But I mean, one thing, you want to prepare for the pit stop. So you these days not allowed to do much. You used to loosen your belts, get rid of the window net, but obviously we don't do that anymore. So you see him boxing, pit limiter is on, the flashing lights across the top. But he actually unplugged his radio really early, and I think that's because Ram is so early in the pit lane. He's probably worried about wasting any time. The issue with that is that he was probably without radio comms for a good 30 seconds. So if the team did want to change their mind, or the pit lane's busy, he's just going to be going in blind essentially. So potentially in the race, that could be quite an interesting factor. If we see a safety car during that pit window, then all hell breaks loose. It's definitely good fun.
Yeah, of course, and we've had that before, of course, especially again here in these 60-minute races. They're shorter races, you've got less time to execute everything correctly, and you also have these success penalties to take into account as well. And in a 60-minute race, you have significantly less time to bounce back from those success penalties. So those who did well last time at Donington Park in the 3-hour race will have extra time to serve in the pits. This is not one of the cars which has a success penalty, though. Michael Igoe at the wheel of the WPI Motorsport Lamborghini, the only GT3 team to have scored points in each one of the 4 races so far, but they are 15.5 points behind Ian Loggy, who leads the championship in the number 6 Ram Racing Mercedes, and that is in part really because Igoe and Keane have not yet won a race. In fact, they've not even been on the podium so far. I think it's fair to say they've never really looked like they've been a threat for a race victory. The consistency is handy to have in a championship campaign, but you have to feel that over the second half of the season, they've got to start winning some races.
Definitely, and they should be, right? With the quality of Igoe and Keane, the quality of the Lamborghini Lamborghini. WPI are a great team. They're not new to the car, so they really don't have any excuses in that fashion. Their qualifying was almost distinctly average yesterday as well. 4th at Igo, 7th at Keen, so it's in the mix, but not at the sharp end. It's an odd one to say the least. I do remember a few years back we had the Geddes win British GT without winning a single race that season. So it can be done. It's just a lot easier if you score big points often, and it makes your life a bit easier when you have a poorer weekend, as it were.
I was impressed with Igo yesterday, actually, because in his qualifying session, he was the best of the non-Mercedes in 4th place, like you said, and out-qualified Adam Ballon, who we know is rapid in his SRO Motorsports Lamborghini. So he was able to deliver the goods, and with the Mercedes AMGs now being slowed down, perhaps, for the races, maybe he might have a shot at getting up there and challenging for a podium, at the very least, you'd imagine, maybe even a race victory. Speaking of SRO Motorsport, it was a few years ago here at Snetterton that they actually managed to win both races in a weekend with the same driver lineup, so it can be done here, and it was a Lamborghini which did it last time. I've always thought of this place as being a good circuit for the Lamborghinis. The mid-engine cars, they work well through that middle sector, they change direction well, and I wonder if now with these amendments to BOP, that's what we're going to see more of today. Yeah,
definitely, and the 2 hairpins, traditionally a mid-engine with the squat of the weight of that engine, does help with the traction. So anything is possible. I think this has got to be the best opportunity they've had of a podium so far this year, WPI. So see the Ram Mercedes of Loggy getting pushed back, being held and then going. So it's a difficult pit lane here. You can see they had to hold because there's 3 cars coming through the pit lane. As we see a spin for the number 2 RJN car. That looks like it's going onto the back straight. James Kell at the wheel there. I always like a prediction, I always like being wrong, but I'd say there he's probably just put an outside wheel just as he turns in. There's a really tempting bit of green concrete that's painted, and you just want to use it and open it up. Just wonder this early in the morning, that concrete is naturally slippier than tarmac and potentially a bit dustier there. So nice save, and it was quite cool how it flipped round onto the old circuit or the 200 configuration, and he can just carry on his merry way.
James Kell then with a bit of a scare, and this is the point I'm making. They've really nothing to gain from pushing hard in this session, and potentially quite a lot to lose. There is the Team Brit McLaren. Saw a feature from this team on TV a while ago. They are the first ever all-disabled driver lineup to race in British GT, and they've been scoring points, actually. They've scored points in a couple of races in the overall GT4 standings, scoring points at Alton Park and last time out at Donington Park. They've not been disgracing themselves at all.
No, not at all. And I would generally say when I raced at Silverstone in the GT3 car and I came across this car, naturally obviously going to lap a GT4 quite quickly, I had no clue that it was any different to anyone else, and they've done such a good job in there. And I put my head in the cockpit, and it is not an easy car to be driving, how they're doing it with the hand controls and everything. So it is absolutely unreal how quick they are, and I just think when they're on track they just look exactly the same, and that is a brilliant thing that you can compete at a completely level playing field.
I would argue that car is harder to drive, actually, certainly for somebody like me, than all of the other cars, because it's a bit like that thing where you pat your head and rub your tummy, isn't it? Having to do so many different things with your hands. It's not easy to do. So, yeah, really, really well done to Aaron Morgan and Bobby Trunley, and looking forward to seeing them improve as we get through the rest of the season. There wasn't much room for improvement left for Enduro Motorsport last time at Donington Park. They qualified on pole position. They may have lost the lead at the start of the race, but they got it back through the first round of pit stops. And from then, Joe, we really didn't see much of them for the final 90 minutes because they disappeared up the road. It was the second biggest winning margin in British GT history of nearly a minute at the end of the 2 hours of racing. Just a phenomenal effort for a team who are really, I think they could still potentially challenge for a good position in the championship this year if they can keep that momentum going.
Yeah, I mean, they're the opposite of WPI, right, in terms of consistency. We've seen some mistakes from Morgan Tilbrook, unfortunately, missing his pit stop at Alton Park, hitting the full course yellow button at Alton Park as well. So they're like big mistakes where you're losing lots of points to then dominating at Donington. I mean, they lapped everyone up to the podium positions, and actually I think they backed off in the last 5 minutes just to sort of manage the risk. So yeah, they should be up there today. They're probably the shiniest out of the McLarens in terms of where they can go from their qualifying positions. Like we've alluded to, there's definitely going to be a difference in the norm. The qualifying guys are normally the quickest, but now with the BOP change, I really do think it's a bit of a grenade within that GT3 field.
Yeah, they're 7th for race 1, 6th for race 2, and I think I'm right in saying they're, yes, the highest placed McLaren on that race 2 grid. Right, let's talk GT4 for a little while, shall we? Because we haven't really mentioned them just yet, apart from the fact that we've said time and again that it's very, very competitive, and we're talking a lot about BOP. There have been no changes made to the BOP in GT4 because, quite frankly, they seem to have got it absolutely spot on, don't they? Every car which is represented in the GT4 grid was competitive in qualifying yesterday, and that's kind of been the case all season long. It's the Academy Motorsport Ford Mustang on pole for the first race, the R Racing Aston Martin on pole for race 2, but we've seen the BMWs looking quick, the Audi is on the front row for the second race, the Porsches are rapid. I think if we can drag our eyes away from the GT3 battle at any point today, GT4 is going to be well worth watching.
Yeah, definitely, and to sort of back up your point, qualifying 1 for GT4 is Ford Mustang from Aston Martin, from Toyota, from Ginetta, from Porsche, from McLaren, and then the next replica car was a Porsche, and then it went to BMW and Audi. So you almost had a different manufacturer fulfilling all of the top positions there. So the BOP is wide open, and that is just going to lead to such good racing. Not because they're just close, but obviously these cars generate their lap time in different ways. So they might be the fastest over the qualifying session, for example, in the Ford Mustang, but they might not be the best under braking. So then they become under attack and vulnerable there. So that's what I love about GT racing, is you might have the fastest car, but it's definitely not the fastest over the whole lap.
Yes, and the great thing about the Snetterton 300 circuit is it gives you a bit of everything. You've got the long straights, you've got the high-speed corners, you've got the change of direction, and also these really slow hairpins through particularly the first half of the lap. And so regardless of what car you're in, there will be an area of the circuit at which you can excel. And certainly it's historically been the McLaren 570S, which has been the strongest of the GT4 cars, actually. In the last 6 years here at Snetterton, at least one of the GT4 races has been won by a McLaren. So we'll see whether they can move their way up the order. We haven't got a McLaren on the front row for either of the races in GT4, but as we said, they've got a decent chance of challenging for podium places. For what it's worth, by the way, with 3 minutes left of the session, Lewis Proctor is fastest in morning warm-up with a 1:47.837. That is an enormous 2/1000ths of a second quicker than this car, the number 66 Porsche from Team Parker Racing, which looked handy in practice yesterday, didn't it? But then, is it fair to say, didn't quite deliver on that potential in quali?
Yeah, I think it flattered to deceive in qualifying, to be honest. I expected that to be up there with the Mercedes, and it just didn't happen. So they haven't had a BOP change, but they will still benefit from the Mercedes being drawn back to them. So hopefully they can get a good race. And it's always interesting when you get 2 races, the AM and the Pro starting. The Pro gets very few opportunities to start in British GT, and Scott Malvern in that Team Parker car is definitely a hard charger and a faster, as we see Sam Neary going fastest now on a 47.6. I mean, that lap time in warm-up is 0.8 of a second faster than the qualifying lap record before this year. So really does show you that even on used tyres in just a warm-up session, how quick we're going to get these cars going today.
And it's only about half a second slower than Sam qualified yesterday. Sam was not happy, I think it's fair to say, after qualifying yesterday. He felt, and he wasn't alone actually in thinking this, felt that he'd been blocked on a couple of fast laps. Put some footage up on social media of him letting another driver know just how displeased he was at them getting in his way at the final corner. It's tricky though. I mean, if you're on a lap or coming back to the pit lane and someone suddenly appears behind you going significantly quicker, it can be difficult sometimes to get out of the way, but traffic was definitely a talking point yesterday. Yeah,
definitely. I think Neary and Jamie Stanley were the 2 affected by it the most, and as you said, he put it on his social media. I don't think disappointed is maybe the strong enough word from what I heard of the audio on it, but yeah, it's difficult in qualifying. Everyone's got their tactics, and these guys, as in Neary and Stanley, were finishing a flying lap, whereas others were starting a flying lap, and you just need a bit more respect really from the guys going slowly. It's fine to go slow and set your lap up, but it's your job to get out of the way and not impede anyone. And it basically, there's no penalties, not really anything they can be given to hurt them for blocking, but all I think is next time I see you on your qualifying lap, I'm definitely getting in your way and giving you a nice cheesy smile to say thank you for last time.
Yes, racing drivers never forget. That is something I've definitely learned over the years. Phil Keane here on a decent lap, personal best in the first sector, but the middle sector just getting away from him slightly. The WPR Lamborghini working its way through on what should be its final lap of the session, 30-odd seconds left, and he's just coming into the final sector. What is a long lap? I mean, 1 minute and 45 in qualifying was the fastest lap time we saw. That's among the longer laps of the season, but the Lamborghini works its way through Coram into this really difficult braking point at the final corner. You're turning right, then you hit the brakes, you've got to change direction into the left and avoid that big sausage curb on the inside. Certainly the Lamborghini is not a car which wants to be riding the curbs too hard. Let's see then whether he can beat the time set by Sam Neary. Across the line goes Phil Keane, and the answer is no. It's a personal best, but he stays in 4th position, and the Lamborghini does actually have time, if he wants it, for one more lap, because the checkered flag only now comes out, and I think Phil is definitely still pushing.
Yeah, definitely. You can see it, and I don't know if it's just because the car's going faster and they're able to take a different line through turn 1. When I drove on Friday, the car's got so much more lateral load grip. You can hang on to the corner later, so I think the cars are exiting later at turn 1, and the sort of exit curb is now redundant. It's too early, and that's why we're seeing cars running wide there, and it goes straight from circuit to dust, and you can just see it's getting kicked up. You can even see the white line is being taken away, and I think that's because the cars bottom out over it and are basically chiseling up the tarmac with their 6,000-pound splitters. So it's going to be interesting there. Like I said earlier, I think there's going to be a lot of dust drawn onto the circuit, and then over a race I think that would just migrate all the way down to the brake zone of turn 2, which could make some interesting moments as we see the red line Lambo already back in the box. They've done a few laps, they're probably happy with the car. Sometimes the amateurs don't like waking up too early, so it might be James has gone out, check the car's okay, and then the AM will turn up a little bit later for the race if that's not too much hassle for him.
4th in the championship are red line. They're doing a good job actually. Didn't score in the first race at Alton Park, of course, after the car ended up in the barriers towards the end of the race in the hands of James Dorlin, but podium at Silverstone and top 5 last time at Donington. They're doing well. Stella Performance, in the Audi. Right, the first time Stella Motorsport, who lead the GT4 category, having done the double at Alton Park at the start of the year. Donington was really their first blip, so they actually arrived here just 4 points ahead of the Newbridge Motorsport Aston Martin in GT4. And there is the Academy Motorsport Ford Mustang, which will start from the pole position for our first of 2 60-minute races today after a good effort from Matt Cowley in the qualifying session yesterday. Still 1 or 2 of them bringing it back to the pit lane, but it looks like Sam Neary is going to be the fastest in morning warm-up, from Lewis Proctor 2nd, Nick Jones or Team Parker Racing in 3rd place, 4th place WPI, and 5th for the 76 McLaren. Another car actually, Joe, which I was pretty impressed with yesterday. Mia Fluid and Ewan Hankey putting in a couple of decent efforts, especially Ewan, who is inside the top 10 for that second race later on. Yeah,
definitely, and I really like what 76 have done. Obviously, new team to the championship, and they've managed to get on top of it pretty quickly, and Ewan's no slouch, and he's going to be able to get on the front foot as well. And I really see him and this car in shot now, the Enduro McLaren, kind of being the catalysts to go forward in their race 2 especially, but even in race 1 when they get in the car.
Here then is the result from our morning warm-up session with the Team ABBA Racing Mercedes AMG on the pole, fastest I should say. They're not on pole position, they'll be starting deep in the field actually for the 2 races later on. Then it is the Greystone GT McLaren second fastest, 3rd the Team Parker Porsche, and then a pair of Lamborghinis. The WPI car again fractionally quicker than the Barwell machine, much as we saw in qualifying yesterday. Then it is the 76 McLaren in 6th position, 7th place for Rocket RJN despite that spin for James Kell, 8th then for the Ram Racing Mercedes of Callum McLeod and Ian Loggy, ahead of their teammate actually, Ulysses DePau and John Ferguson, pole sitters for the first race today. And it's the Graham Davidson and Martin Plowman car. Graham Davidson driving for the second different team this year as the super sub that he's become known now, having raced at the start of the season at Alton for RJN. He's now racing in the Paddock Motorsport car, replacing Kelvin Fletcher for this weekend. Redline Racing's Lamborghini was 11th ahead of Fox Motorsport, Assetto Motorsports Bentley. That car was quick yesterday, and I'll be interested again to see how that finds itself competing in the races. And then in GT4, R Racing, who got themselves a pole position for race 2. They were fastest ahead of Stella Motorsports Audi, the second of the GT4 cars. And for what it's worth, 3rd was the number 65 Porsche, with Seb Hopkins, I believe, setting that time 3rd in GT4. So, morning warm-up then complete here at Snetterton. Let's remind ourselves of a few of the highlights. The 15-minute morning warm-up session here at Snetterton for the Intelligent Money British GT Championship was, by and large, a fairly uneventful affair, which is just what the teams wanted. This final opportunity to shake down the cars, check the circuit conditions, and for a few of those in GT3 to find out exactly how the overnight balance of performance changes had affected their cars. It was certainly a competitive session still though, with the WPI Motorsport Lamborghini putting in a few decent laps towards the end of the session in the hands of Phil Keane. He rounded out fourth. There was a spin though for the number 2 Rocket RJN McLaren of James Kell. The McLaren's given some extra power overnight and a little bit less weight to try and make them a bit more competitive. The Team Brit car was circulating well within a GT4 field, which was headed eventually by the R Racing Aston Martin number 23, which again will be on pole for one of the races here today, the 2 60-minute races upcoming. Fastest though within GT3 was Team Aber Racing's Sam Neary, who strung together a couple of quick lap times toward the very end of the session. Second fastest for the Proctors, father and son pairing, Lewis and Stuart Proctor in their Greystone GT McLaren. All this then in preparation for the 2 60-minute races coming up here at Snetterton, the first of them starting at 11:15. Be sure to join us for what's set to be another entertaining day of GT racing.